Hello everyone and welcome to this, our sixth part of our Witchwood First Impressions series. Got Pandemonia with me as always, and we're going to jump right into these cards. So starting off in alphabetical order with the classes, we've got about 17 cards I think it is today to go through.
Yeah.
And first off we have Splintergraft. This is one of the Druid Legendaries. It's an 8 mana, 8/8 legendary with Battle Cry. Choose a friendly minion, add a 10/10 copy to your hand that costs 0. That costs 10. Woo! If it costed 0, this would be very good. With it making cards cost 10, and you get a 10 mana 10/10, I'm not particularly excited by that.
I mean, there's obviously some weird and wonderful combos, right? I mean, like people have said, like what's it in Wild with Double Gangster and Standard, you've got Sandnut Chain Gang or Stone Tusk Boar. I mean, obviously that's always sort of the first one people reach to.
Even a 10 mana 10/10 I wouldn't want. Over Stone Tusk Boar, you'd rather have Argent Commando or something that at least has Divine Shield or something There's other ways to get it to be better than the Stone Tusk Boar.
I mean, this appeals to the Timmy, right? I mean, for Magic the Gathering, the Timmy player, the player who likes playing really big things, and doing these super big and wonderful combos, right?
Yeah.
Competitively, I don't see it. As long as there's still UI in the format, like a card like UI,
Yeah.
I don't think you need it, right?
Yeah, that's the big thing in Druid. I don't really want to be playing 10 mana 10/10s when I can just play Ultimate Infestation. I mean, I'd even rather play Tarantus than a 10 mana 10/10 most of the time. So,
yeah. But and you don't really want to be playing Tyrantus.
No, I have no inclination to play Tarantus. So, Splintergraft, yeah, interesting. Maybe there's some combos there in the future. People have also discussed with the Giants, it kind of works there because the card reduction still works. So you can, do it on a Mountain Giant, a Molten Giant, in Wild now. Or any of the kind of Giants, and the reduction still works there. But I'm not sold. You're just getting a 2/2 stat upgrade on your Giants, and you have to play an 8 mana 8/8 to get that. And playing the 8 mana 8/8 is bad. And your Giant has to survive on the board. And if it's like a Mountain Giant or something, you probably played it earlier, and then
That sounds like a lot of ands.
Yeah. There's too many ants in that scenario. The big thing is that you have to copy something that's on the board, and so that's bad. And so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to Mage, and we have Book of Specters. Book of Specters is a 2 mana epic spell. Draw 3 cards, discard any spells drawn. So the idea here is obviously you're supposed to be playing Book of Specters in quite a minion-heavy deck, ideally.
Yeah.
I think the discard thing here can be a bit of a trap. People kind of look at this as, I don't want to discard cards. In many ways, it's just like, a lot of the time it's just 2 mana draw 2, which is pretty good. I mean, we play Arcane Intellect, that's 3 mana draw 2. And some of the time it is actually just 2 mana draw 3, which is really, really good. So I think Book of Specters is really pretty good. They're definitely trying to push a more mid-rangey mage or some kind of mage that doesn't really have a lot of
spells.
Yeah, a lot of spells. I mean, Secret Mage has a lot of the spells that are based around the burn. And you wouldn't really want to discard your burn cards because they're kind of crucial to your game plan. But you can probably get away with it if you're playing enough burn cards. And you already have Aluneth that's kind of going to want to draw you cards. I mean, this can help you find Aluneth, but it's not really... It's kind of counterintuitive to run both. A lot of the time you just run one Arcane Intellect. And anyway, and then in Control Mage, obviously that deck generally has a lot more spells than it does minions, so Book of Specters is pretty bad there. So it definitely looks like they're trying to push some other kind of mage. To me, the big thing that sticks out is a Elemental Mage. They've been trying to push that mechanic for quite a while, and I see Book of Specters as a good way to refill your hand. And if your deck is mostly elementals, therefore it's mostly minions, you can still draw them. Importantly, you also won't discard Death Knight Jaina, and that's pretty important because that's obviously a very key card in Elemental Mage. So, I mean, anything else to add on Book of Specters?
I'll be honest, when I saw it for the very first time, I wasn't 100% sold on it, but the more I've thought about it and the more I look at it, I've actually become more and more sort of convinced that it's good. Obviously, you've got to kind of do the numbers in terms of like statistically the chances of getting, you know, because like we say, draw one card is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Draw two cards is still good. So it's about working out if the payoff is the expected, what the expected outcome is obviously going to be positive most of the time. Then you're obviously going to run it.
Yeah, if the expected value for cards you're drawing is somewhere between 2 and 3, then it's going to be pretty good in those decks. It's definitely not an auto-include in all decks, in all mage decks. So, in that sense, I think it's quite a good design. A lot of the time when they made mage spells, they've just been too flexible and like fitting into a lot of decks like Primordial Glyph.
I was going to say, cough.
Although that isn't played in Control Mage purely because Dragon's Fury kind of pushed it out. Which was a good move from Blizzard, at least, to all kind of correct the overpoweredness of Primordial Glyph. So moving on, we have a very controversial and hyped up mage legendary, Toki Time Tinker. Toki is a 6-mana 5/5 minion with Battle Cry. Add a random legendary minion from the past to your hand. Ooh. So, to clarify, the past means wild. So, any legendaries that are currently in wild. So, you can't get anything that's currently in standard, basically.
Yeah. And just also clarify, including obviously the ones that are rotating there soon.
Yes. It's at the time of playing Toki. So in a year's time, when we're sitting here, Toki's pool will change when the sets from 2017 rotate out into wild as well. But for now, some peeps have done the maths. Wegus and some friends of his, Wampy and some other guys have done the maths at least on Toki to kind of look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. That you can get from Toki. There's a couple massive high rolls, stuff like Ragnaros, the Fire Lord, even the Light Lord's pretty good as well. Sylvanas, Emperor Thaurissan. Emperor Thaurissan in any control mage is pretty nice.
High rolls. The like Sylvanas.
Yeah. And then we have, there's quite a few like good legendaries as well. Some of them depend like on the scenario. Some of them are like a bit slow, not stuff you would have seen before, like Chromagus. Even Yogg Saron can be kind of questionable as good, but it's probably good. Foe Reaper, Trogzor. These are the kind of good cards that are good value, but never really saw play, some of them. And then there's a lot of like playable things, which can include things like a Nubarak, which is like insane value if that's actually something that matters. Down to like Shifter Xeris, which can be anything again. So, Shifter Xeris will then only be anything in standard. So that's the way you get standard legendaries out of Toki, I believe.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way. And then there's like stuff like Zarel. So the playable pool is quite big, but they're generally cards that don't have a particularly great board impact when you play them, but maybe sometimes can generate you some value. So if we look at the percentages overall here, what they've classified as high roll, good, playable, bad, and garbage. So the good stuff, so that's just good and high roll, is 28%. The playable stuff is 61.68%, which is basically all the playable, good, and high roll stuff. Which leaves you at about 38% bad and garbage. So, is this something you're willing to play with those kind of numbers?
It's kind of, if you want to have something fun, right? Like completely fun, and you want a little bit extra value in your deck, I would say maybe, it's a very difficult card to assess, right? Because, trying to assess all of these legendaries, a lot of them are good in certain scenarios and terrible in others. It's very difficult to say this legendary is just good. Obviously there are some that are going to be good more of the time, but a lot of them that rank between, let's say, playable and bad, there are times when they're insane. There's it's going to be it's very difficult. And obviously you're going to also see the Trollden videos, where someone rips a Ragnaros that snipes a 1 in 7 or 1 in 8. You can obviously see those things happening. But I'm not sure if it's going to be consistent, because obviously this deck, a card like this is obviously not very consistent, right?
Yeah.
By its very nature, it's not.
Yeah, and the fact is you're only really getting one shot at this, right? And with such a varying pool, it is going to give like massively varying results. So overall, I'm not particularly excited. It's not something I really want to put in like a serious control mage. You know, if we're talking about
Yeah.
wanting to actually ladder up and to rank
If
up.
I want
I
to
mean,
win, I probably don't want to run this.
yeah, but it's definitely something that's going to be exciting for a lot of players. So it's cool in that sense at least.
It's a cool card, but like it's not it's one of the cool Hearthstone cards, right? This is like these are the cards that embody Hearthstone, right?
Sure, yeah. It's definitely something, you can do in Hearthstone that you can't do in like physical card games, for instance.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Now we have Paladin, and opening up for Paladin is going to be Bellringer Sentry. Bellringer Sentry is a 4-mana 3/4 minion. It's a rare. It has Battle Cry and Death Rattle. Put a secret from your deck into the battlefield. So, I mean, the immediate comparison is Mysterious Challenger, right?
Yeah, I mean that's obviously the first that came to a lot of people's minds. But this is significantly weaker for quite a few reasons. So, I mean, we'll start off simply stats-wise. It's just firstly, its stats are worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a 6-mana 6/6 versus a 4-mana 3/4, and then moving on to the actual effect, Bellringer Sentry only brings one into play when it comes into play, and one when it does. And so the problem is, and historically, is that majority of the Paladin secrets are bad.
Yeah.
Like, they hardly ever are cards you want to put into your deck. The only reason why Mysterious Challenger actually became so powerful was because getting all the secrets at that one time created a very, like, quite a tricksy sort of board state to navigate a situation, because you had Noble Sacrifice, which then, when you killed the Noble Sac, triggered Avenge, which then got Redemption, and then you had Competitive Spirit. So, like, basically, with just the Mysterious Challenge on board, if you triggered those secrets, you got quite a, you had like a 9/8 Mysterious Challenger, a 2/1, and then Competitive Spirit might go off or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas, by just having one, it's nowhere near as difficult for your opponent to play around, right?
Yeah, so first off, I mean, I think the one important thing you pointed out there was that Avenge was one of the big power secrets with Mysterious Challenger, and that's obviously a wild card now, so you're not going to be able to get any Avenge from Bellringer Sentry. And then the second thing that you kind of importantly pointed out is that a lot of the secrets tended to synergize with each other, especially around Revenge, honestly.
Avenge, yeah.
Sorry, Avenge, yeah. So, only bringing one at a time is definitely a lot weaker. Obviously, Bellringer Sentry can, like, bring you getaway Kodos, right, for, like, some massive value. But that doesn't really give you, like, just getting... It's going to stop, right, at some point, because it's not like Hydrologist that generates the secret. Bellringer Sentry has to pull the secret out of your deck.
Which then brings on to the point of you have to run... the problem is you have to be running these secrets in your deck.
And if you're running 2 Bellringer Sentries, that's 4 secrets that will be pulled. If you have 4 secrets and 2 Bellringer Sentries, you're definitely not going to get full value from your sentries unless you're very lucky with the order you draw at. So, I mean, that's one of the other things. As you said, all the secrets getting put into play at once from Mysterious Challenger had a big effect on thinning your deck. Bellringer Sentry's effect at thinning your deck is much slower, and you get much more punished for having to put these secrets in your deck. So... I don't think Bellringer Sentry is going to see any play. Unless we get some really good new Paladin secrets.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the potential. Spoiling a card like that, there might be a Paladin secret still coming. And then we'll obviously have to reassess. But as it stands, probably not a card I want to be putting into my Paladin deck. Because the next one we're going to be talking about is the card I would rather put into its place.
Yeah, and that is the Glass Knight. The Glass Knight is a 4-mana 4/3 legendary minion with Divine Shield, and whenever you restore health, gain Divine Shield. So, at first I kind of looked at this as only restore health to you, but it's actually restore health in general, right? So if you restore health to your minions, that would also work. Not that the Paladin has very many ways to do that, outside of Holy Light and Ragnaros Light Lord, which is rotating out, and what's the 8-mana spell?
Forbidden Healing.
Forbidden Healing as well, also, but that's also
Lay on
wild.
hands.
Lay on hands, that's what I was thinking. You can lay on hands a minion. But anyway, point is, it's a 4 mana 4/3 with Divine Shield, which is not too bad, not too bad. And the fact that the Divine Shield effect might be repeatable is, pretty powerful. I think a 4 mana 4/3 with Divine Shield is, in a way, comparable to Piloted Shredder.
Yeah, people were looking at Pilot Shredder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously strictly, well, I mean, I would say stats wise it's strictly better than Cthulhu's Chosen. It obviously doesn't buff Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously not rotating. But I mean, stats wise it's got one more health than Cthulhu Chosen, as well as being able to repeat this effect is a massive thing. I mean, the best part about a card like this is even if you take away that second line, the card is probably still quite good.
Yeah.
Like I'm leaning more towards this card being good. Like I know you were very like, oh, it's okay. I really think.
I mean, I thought it was okay when it didn't have when it didn't have Divine Shield to start off with.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the tricky part for me is how do you restore health on curve and play Glass Knight. Whereas if you're playing it on curve as just a 4/3 with no Divine Shield, it's bad. But because it naturally has Divine Shield, that's not so much of an issue.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, this contests the board really well, and, having to deal with it. And then, obviously, like, for me, I look at this card as a 4 mana 4/3 Divine Shield. If you are ever getting the Divine Shield again, like, I think it's super good.
Yeah, it's pretty silly.
I mean, it becomes quite nutty, in terms of that, the card advantage that, like, we're talking about in the last Magma Rage episode, the amount of sort of value this and card advantage this generates. Because it's 1 minion that can potentially require 2, 3, 4 cards to deal with.
Yeah, it keeps you very ahead on the board. And I mean, I think the best way of restoring health and kind of still playing into this game plan, so not trying to play like some control deck, which is not where I really think Glass Knight is going to shine, is if you're playing True Silver Champion. It hasn't really seen a lot of play in a while, partly because, Rallying Blade's been more popular. So maybe now with Rallying Blade rotating out, True Silver Champion and Glass Knight can see some play. The big problem with Glass Knight is that it is legendary, so you don't want to run too much healing synergy around your one legendary card when, in general, you're probably wanting to put this in a deck that has, some kind of like mid-range to aggressive game plan. And the other big problem is that playing True Silver Champion and Glass Knight are 4 mana cost cards, and you have Call to Arms. So you're then running 5 4 mana cards, which is the most you can realistically run, and this is assuming you're not playing Murloc Paladin, where you're also playing Gentle Megasoul.
Yeah, so it's that 4 spot that becomes quite contested. That has it's always been actually in Paladin. It's always actually been quite contested, considering you like in the basic set you have True Silver Champion and Consecration.
Yeah, and Holy Wrath is not even that
Holy
bad.
Wrath and Blessing of Kings.
Not Holy Wrath. What's the 4 mana 3 damage? Holy Wrath is the 5 mana.
Hammer of Wrath.
Hammer of Wrath, yeah, that one.
And Blessing of Kings.
Yeah,
so
and
like,
Blessing of Kings.
even from just like basic times, the 4 slots as being very congested in Paladin.
Yeah,
but
and now all those cards are usurped by Call to Arms.
Exactly. I mean, I could easily see Call to Arms, Glass Knight, and double True Silver Champion being a thing, to be very honest. It's just a case of because I mean, Glass Knight fits in a more mid-range shell than an aggressive, in an aggressive, whether it's duded in or just straight out aggro, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I mean, Glass Knight definitely looks quite powerful, and especially if you're able to protect it behind something like Righteous Protector, as well, then that allows you to have more reliable chance of repeating the Divine Shield effect.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other card that I think you first mentioned when we spoke about this when it was released was Benevolent Knight. What's it? Benevolent
Jin, I think it is.
Jin, yeah. But I think that card's a little bit slow. 3 mana 2/4.
Doesn't see much play. I mean, it's just got that sort of curve, right? It restores health to your heroes, so I think it returns 2 health at the end of your turn. So I mean, you could theoretically play the 3 mana 2/4. And then play Glass Knight.
Sure, but the thing is, like, you want Glass Knight. Glass Knight comes in with Divine Shield, right? And you want to play... Ideally, you want to be gaining health on 5 after Glass Knight wasn't killed.
Yeah, that's
so the curve doesn't even really work that well there.
Exactly.
Glass Knight could definitely go in whatever this mid-range Paladin shellers that might have to run dragons for the
Yeah.
gargoyle as well. That could definitely be a thing.
And then
With like
blood
scale
blood
banes and
blood knight incoming, blood knight tech incoming low.
I'm not sure about that one, but possibly. Moving on, we have another Paladin card, Silver Sword. This is an 8 mana 3/4 weapon. After your hero attacks, give your minions +1/+1. So being able to buff your whole board, generally quite a powerful effect, but it comes at a high cost here. 8 mana for a 3/4 weapon. At a 3/4 weapon for 8, you're probably not trading too often with this, into minions. So a lot of the time it's kind of just going face, and that's pretty unimpactful, I would say. Maybe you use it to trade alongside a minion, but you're going to be taking quite a bit of damage, killing your opponent's
the
8
effect
mana.
is
and
powerful, as
more
you said,
cost
but
minions.
currently we still have Vine Cleaver.
Yeah.
That's currently what I just quickly checked to make sure the Vine Cleaver isn't rotating out. It's from Ungoro, so I just want to make sure if it wasn't rotating. But basically, there's very little reason for me right now to run that weapon over Vine Cleaver. I
Yep.
mean, the buff effect, it's the kind of one that you need a board going into it, your turn 8, which I think is a bit awkward if you're playing any sort of aggressive aggressive like Dudaden or Murloc Paladin.
I think having a board is not unrealistic, but it is a little bit more, like, win more in that scenario. Whereas, like,
Probably
Vine
ahead of
Cleaver...
Wolverine.
Yeah, whereas Vine Cleaver is giving you the value, Silver Sword's not giving you value, it's just helping you push your advantage.
Yeah. So for the most part, I don't see. I still think Vine Cleaver is probably just better most of the times.
Definitely.
That's my sort of when I first saw the card, I was like, Vine Cleaver.
Yeah, it is very difficult for it to contest with Vine Cleaver, I think, and that's really going to be the telltale point here. It is something you can try and set up the turn before, and then you can spam the board afterwards, but there's no Stand Against Darkness that's rotating out as well, so I don't really see... And honestly, buffing up dudes from 1/1s to 2/2s is not that powerful. They still die to most AoE. You kind of want to be hitting... The key point is to hit from like 3 health to 4 health. That can be quite big. You can get around Hellfire, Dustbreaker, those kind of things. So, yeah, Silver Sword, probably not going to see too much play, I don't think. Next we have some rogue cards. We have Miss Wraith. Miss Wraith is a 4 mana 3/5 with whenever you play an Echo card, gain +1/+1. And the other card we have synergized with, so let's actually look at that quickly first. We have Pickpocket. Pickpocket is a 2 mana echo spell. It's a rare and it reads, add a random card to your hand from your opponent's class. So, with this Thief Rogue game plan here, kind of comparable to Hallucination, except with Hallucination you actually get to discover a card from your opponent's class. So
More similar to Burgle.
Yeah, so... obviously, Hallucination is much more powerful there. And as you mentioned, it's kind of similar to Burgle. Burgle is 3 mana for 2 random cards from your opponent's class. Here, you're paying 2 mana for 1. So with the Echo, you can pay 4 for 2, 6 for 3, 8 for 4, and 10 for 5. I think if you're in a scenario where you can pay 10 mana for 5 random cards and not die, you're probably in a pretty decent scenario. I mean, yes, all these Echo cards are like, okay, Echo could be good in Arena, right? But we're not really going to be talking too much about Arena, those kind of scenarios where both players are maybe top decking and this is the only card you top deck. Then, yeah, sure, it's good. But most of the time, Pickpocket is not going to be in your deck, so it's not going to be a scenario like that in Standard, as I think it's a pretty bad card. The one thing it has going for it, and we've mentioned this with some of the other Echo cards, and this is way definitely not enough to play it, but... the one thing it has going is that you can use Pickpocket and then see what card you get and maybe you play that card. And then you can Pickpocket again and maybe you play that card, right? So you don't have to commit to a certain amount of mana until you see that you don't want to play the card. So there's like some dream scenarios where you can, Pickpocket a Consecration to save you or something ridiculous like that.
Pickpocket's lethal, basically.
Pickpocket Lay of Hands. That's kind of the only kind of scenarios that and the problem is Pickpocket's just not good enough to be in a deck in Standard, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, basically, like you say, you're basically playing similar with Warpath. You're paying a 1 mana premium for basically every comparable sort of card.
Yeah.
Like at most of the levels. But
Yeah.
Mistwraith, though, potentially with some of the other Echo cards.
Sure. I mean, Mistwraith, 4 mana 3/5. Those stats are kind of okay on the baseline, but the big problem for me is it reads whenever you play an Echo card game +1/+1, and I don't want to play any Echo cards. I have not seen a single Echo card worth playing in Rogue. The closest is Face Collector, and Face Collector is like, I don't want to play Mistwraith into Face Collector really. Like, yeah, you can get a bunch of stats on the board, but no. Mistwraith at 4 mana, it's contested by like Felderai Strider, or if you're coining something like Elven Minstrel. Or if you have the coin, you can also, on turn 4, you can coin a Vilespine. There's just so many, other options to play instead of Mistwraith that seem a lot more powerful for Rogue. Heck, in Rogue, I'd probably rather play Violet Teacher again than play Mistwraith.
That's actually very true as well.
Because you just get a 1/1 instead of Mistwraith gaining you +1/+1. So I just don't see any place for Mistwraith unless Echo is particularly powerful. And once again, most of the Echo cards you want to play in Rogue are probably spells, and if they're spells, you can play Violet Teacher.
No, that's true. I mean, I was thinking maybe Cheap Shot. I mean, maybe you play Mistwraith and the turn after you kill some stuff with Cheap Shot. And then maybe, I don't know, like, it probably still is not good enough.
Nah.
But unless they spoil a ridiculously powerful Echo, right? I mean, that's what changes this.
Yeah, but I don't really see that happening. So some pretty disappointing cards continuing the disappointing theme for Rogue. And speaking of disappointing cards, we have what I would say is possibly the worst card here. And that's Totem Cruncher. The scary little hedgehog thing is a 4 mana 2/3 beast. It's an epic. It has Taunt and Battle Cry. Destroy your totems. Gain +2/+2 for each destroyed.
So I initially read this. I must just say, I initially thought, ooh, like this. Are they predicting the Rise of Shaman? Is this like a crab for your opponent's totems? And then I paused. And I was like, wait, destroy your totems.
Yeah. So first of all, let's look at the curve scenarios. You can play this on curve. You have to have. If you have 1 totem on the board from hero powering on 2 and it survives somehow, you get a 4 mana 4/5 with Taunt. That's a Yeti with Taunt. I would not play that in a deck. If you have 2 totems survive, you get a 4 mana 6/7 with Taunt, and then your opponent just kills it.
Well, okay, so 4 mana 6. Okay, so we'll start here. 4 mana 6/7 is pretty good, but the problem is leading up to that, the fact that you've probably hero power on turn 2, and then you've hero power on turn 3, means that you're so far behind on board.
Yeah.
Not to mention that a lot of decks are playing Spellbreaker.
Well, I mean,
obviously
yeah. So I mean, the only way you're getting away with that hero power on turn 2, hero power on turn 3, is if your opponent disconnects. And even in that scenario, if you play Totem Cruncher, eat up your totems, you get your 4 mana 6/7, and then as you mentioned, they play Spellbreaker, and all of a sudden they have a 4 mana 4/3 versus your 4 mana 2/3, and somehow you're in a worse position on board, even though they disconnected for 2 turns. So that kind of tells the story of Totem Cruncher.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. And the worst part about it is even if it destroyed your opponent's totem, it probably still would be bad, right?
Yeah. It's bad.
Like, as a niche tech option, if totems became a massive problem. But, I mean, yeah, this is...
And if you really want, you can destroy your Amalgam. You can go 3 mana Amalgam, 3/4. Then you'll probably still have a totem on the board next turn. And you can destroy it to gain probably less stats than it was worth at that point. So, yeah, no, Totem Cruncher, no.
Not to mention... based on its ability, you never want to be doing this on turn 6 where you go hero power and Totem Cruncher, because 6 mana 4/5 is also pretty terrible. I mean,
I'd rather just play Earth Elemental.
Oh no! Well, I mean, Boulder Fist Ogre.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Earth Elemental at least it has taunt, and sure, it overloads me, but overloading is better in that scenario. Like, even though we're talking about, oh, it's a 4 mana 6/7 when you eat 2 totems, it's not really, because you just took stats off the board too.
Yeah,
So, let's say you took bare minimum 1/3 worth of stats off the board. So your like net gain on the board is terrible,
so I
and
think we
totem
can move
cruncher
on.
is terrible. Yes,
I
yes.
explained enough. That's terrible.
It is fun to beat on really terrible cards, though. So, I mean, that's kind of why we spent some time on that. Next, we have Warrior card, Fester Root Hulk. Fester Root Hulk is a 5 mana 2/7 rare minion with after a friendly minion attacks, gain +1 attack. So, if you play this on 5 and you attack with 2 minions, it can be a 5 mana 4/7. You attack with 1, it's a 5 mana 3/7. I mean, if you're attacking with 3 minions, it's probably irrelevant that you're playing a 5 mana 5/7. So, with those kind of scenarios in mind, what do you think of Fester Root Hulk?
I think it's a bit probably too low impact as a 5-drop. I mean, yes, you can, if it survives, you can obviously do silly things. It's kind of, you can do things like, basically, I look at it like a similar to Frothing Berserker in a way.
Yeah, but a slower ramp up.
Kind of a slower ramp up.
Warriors are not traditionally a class that have a lot of minions on the board.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure if it's good enough. I mean, it possibly in some sort of mid-range tempo show.
Sure, yeah.
It's possible. Especially, they're promoting a lot of the rush minions in Warrior. It's a possibility.
Yeah, the Rush Warrior is definitely the one deck I could see Fester Root Hulk seeing some amounts of play. But even there's things you'd probably want to do on 5 rather. Darius Crowley is the obvious option. And probably even just play Arcanine Reaper. Like, that's the big thing for me. I'd probably rather play Arcanine Reaper than Fester Root Hulk most of the time, right?
Yeah.
I think if Fester Root Hulk read whenever a friendly character attacks, that would be nicer. It would at least synergize with the warrior's, weapon identity.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's true.
But yeah, as it is, it's not a terrible card if you need a filler for a newer player, but it's not something I think that's going to see much competitive play.
Yeah.
Next, we have a card that is very much on the other end of the spectrum. We have Town Crier. Town Crier is a 1 mana 1/2 epic minion with Battle Cry. Draw a rush minion from your deck. So first off, this is pretty much the cheapest tutor effect we've ever seen. Tutor effects are kind of effects that draw very specific cards from your deck. So in this case, drawing a rush minion from your deck. We've spoken a lot about Rush Warrior. That's really the Warrior deck that I see being pretty good going forward.
Mainly because of Militant Commander and the
Militia
Legendary.
Commander. Yeah, Militia Commander, Darius Crowley, and the Axe, the Woodcutter's Axe. Those are the 3 cards that really stick out to me. I think it definitely needs to find maybe one or 2 other rush cards to be really good. But Town Crier is a good way of at least getting those in your hand. And the other thing I was worried about with that deck was not really having a turn 1 play. And Town Crier certainly solves that problem, right? It is going to allow you to... a 1 mana 1/2 stats is pretty decent. And if we compare this to something like Firefly, it's a 1 mana 1/2 and you get a 1/2 in your hand. Well, in this case, you're getting a much better minion than a 1/2 with Town Crier.
Most times, yes.
Yeah, so I think Town Crier is really good. I mean, even if you get the worst case minion, which is like the Wasp, right? It's a 2 mana 1/3. At least the worst case warrior minion.
Even. I mean, you hit the curve, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think Town Crier is really good. It's going to be one of those 100% keep on the mulligan cards for Rush Warrior. And I think as long as Rush Warrior is a deck, Town Crier will be good. And I do think Rush Warrior will be good. So I think Town Crier could be the card that makes Rush Warrior good. Because it gives you the consistency to use those important tempo tools.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it fetches that important, whether it's a 4-drop or 5-drop a lot of the times, to just... So, it's definitely...
I think
excited for a card like that.
What the deck really needs is a 3 mana rush card. That would really make things good. Even if it's a decent-ish 3 mana rush card, honestly, because what that allows you to do is go Town Crier into Woodcutter's Axe into 3 mana rush, and then you get the buff immediately from the Woodcutter's Axe attacking the second time. I think, just the curve of Town Crier into Woodcutter's Axe is already kind of strong curve. We've seen it in Shaman, Firefly into Jade Claws, and arguably it's kind of similar. I think that's going to be a very strong curve. Imagine you're on the coin, you go Town Crier, Woodcutter's Axe, coin Militia Commander.
And we all live happily ever after.
That board is definitely yours at that point.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I think Town Crier is going to be really, really good. As long as there's enough rush support, which it seems like they're printing a lot of rush cards, so we can imagine that we should be able to find enough. The big thing that warrior deck needs at the moment now is some kind of win conditions, and I think that's going to be the real trick into making that deck work. Possibly even maybe some spiteful kind of win conditions. That could be a good 6-drop for the deck if it can find a way to not really play any other spells. So yeah, I mean, Town Crier, a really, really strong card in my opinion. Next up, we have another card with a tutor type of effect, and one of Pandemonia's favorites already. Do you want to tell everyone about this card?
Countess Ashmore. So I hope that is the card you're talking about.
Yes.
So from a design perspective, I mean, it's not.
First of all, just tell the listeners and viewers what the card is.
Okay, 7 mana, 6/6 legendary minion, battle cry, draw a rush, lifesteal, and death rattle card from your deck.
Yep.
So players who've been playing for a while will notice this is a very similar mechanic or mechanism to the curator that's about to rotate out.
Yeah, from Caravan.
Except instead of them being types, this is searching for keywords now, which makes it, I think, a lot more versatile at other times. But so draw a rush minion. They've been, like you said, like you've mentioned, there've been quite a lot of rush minions printed. At the moment, Warrior seems to be sticking out as sort of the rush class a little bit more than others, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best rush classes. So I mean, before we get into talking about the synergies in particular, Stancifka made a really good kind of infographic. I mean, it's really just a collection and grouping of some of the important cards that could come out that you could draw with Countess Ashmore. So let's have a quick look at that. So once again in Rush, you mentioned Warrior. There's like Militia Commander, Red Band Wasp, Darius Crowley, and then in the neutrals there's like Muck Hunter that he included here, which is maybe one of the other Rush cards you'd play if you're playing this in a non-Warrior class. And then there's Spectral Castaway, a card we're not particularly big fans of, but it is probably a decent draw with Countess if you are playing a rogue Rush deck. And then when it comes to Lifesteal and Death Rattle, that's probably where you see more of the really interesting things. And the one other interesting thing is this doesn't just draw minions like Curator. It can actually draw spells as well. So
and
weapons. And weapons, yeah. So this is where we see it being relevant in the Lifesteal section, right? We see, you're able to draw the Spellstones in Warlock. You're able to draw Spirit Lash in Priest. The Cutlass in Rogue, which is pretty terrible. And then you got some minions like Bloodworm, Chillblade Crusader, and Obsidian Statue. And then Death Rattle, it's by far the most popular, at least, most widely used of these mechanics. So there's a lot more options in Death Rattle. We're talking some really good value cards like Savannah Highmane, Tyrion, Ken, even stuff like Katharina. If you can kind of put some kind of combo hunter deck together. And then we've also got the weapons like Bloodrazor, Kingsbane, Valenier, and then...
Axe.
Sorry?
And the Woodcutter's Axe.
Oh yeah, and the Woodcutter's Axe as well. And then, it might be a good card actually for that kind of warrior deck to be refill, because you can draw the axe as well. That's a very good point. And then, I mean, there's obviously the Warlock, minions we all know and love so well. Voidlord, Rin, and the cube, where you can draw quite a few cards. I'm not really sure I see it fitting in that deck so much, because that deck certainly doesn't struggle to draw cards. But it does draw some very powerful tools for that deck. The Spellstones, and of course, those Death Rattle minions that we mentioned. So, I mean, definitely Countess Ashmore is going to be an interesting inclusion in a lot of these kind of decks. So, what's the one that really sticks out to you, where you want to kind of try out Countess Ashmore?
So the two classes that first popped into my mind is Warrior and Warlock. Although, like, looking at this, Priest might actually not be the worst. The important thing to note, though, is that majority of the times, even though you can draw 3 cards, like, if you look at this infographic, majority of the time, you're probably going to only be drawing 2 cards.
Yeah.
Like, Death Rattle, you're probably almost always drawing a Death Rattle because of the variety, I think.
Yeah.
And then it's probably a case of, are you running Death Rattle and Rush, or does your class support Death Rattle and Lifesteal? Because Lifesteal, obviously, also not particularly a lot of... The only time it's mainly Warlock and Priest that you'll, actually be getting a card from it for Lifesteal.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 really good cards for Lifesteal are the Spellstone, Spirit Lash, and Obsidian Statue, right?
Yeah, those are like the really powerful ones. So, I mean, 7 mana for 6/6 that draws you 2 cards and some powerful like answers and threats. I'm a value. I'm a lover of value, so that definitely, I'm a big fan of it. So obviously, unfortunately, compared to Curator, this doesn't have Taunt. So it doesn't, and the Taunt did help store the board a lot, and help you find more, just buy a little more time.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit more proactive in that sense. The fact that it's a 6/6, so it's obviously better statted. But I really like this card, and I really think it's going to. I think this is going to see play in I wouldn't say every deck, but quite a few decks, I think.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a powerful tool, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see once we see all the rest of the cards.
Yeah.
Maybe we get obviously some more Rush cards, and maybe even some more Lifesteal cards. That would be interesting to see.
I mean, because if just some of these classes got more Lifesteal or more Rush, all of it. I mean, for example, hypothetically, if a good neutral Rush card, a neutral Lifesteal card came out.
Yeah.
A little bit better than Bloodworm, for example.
Yeah, or like a Hunter Lifesteal card, right? Then you could have all of the options in Hunter as well. You'd be able to get, Rush from stuff like the Mastiff. And then you'd be able to get cards like Highmane and Katharina for, those kind of value options as well. So I definitely think Countess Ashmore is going to be a pretty interesting card going forward. I think much like Curator, it might see play kind of in and out of the meta, depending on whether the decks can afford to run it, and depending on whether there's minions that are relevant in the meta that have the keywords. But as you mentioned, it is a little bit more flexible than Curator because there's more options than just having to be a beast, a dragon, and a murloc. But the other thing is that taunting really means that it just doesn't have the same impact on board, which is why it can be quite important if you're able to pull something like a buffed up Kingsbane with it, or a Spirit Lash, where you can actually combo that card to have an impact on the board as well.
Yeah, so this is definitely, for me, the value card so far of the set.
Yeah.
Just oozes value.
Yeah, and I think it's got a lot of people excited.
Yeah, up to now, most of the neutral legendaries hadn't really excited me that much. This is the first. I think this is actually the last neutral legendary, and this is probably the only one out of the 5 neutral that have kind of made me anything excited.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. We have Mossy Hara, another neutral card. It's a 6 mana, 2/7 epic minion with Battle Cry. Destroy all other minions with 2 or less attack. So you kind of compared this to some other cards. Shadowword Horror on a stick, I believe, was what you said.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what they've done. So I think it's quite a powerful effect. The fact that obviously this only comes down on turn 6 does... But it's sort of a case of it only comes down on turn 6, but it also leaves behind a 2/7 body, which is quite a sturdy body. I mean, it's not the most aggressive body, but it does seem to be quite good at, let's say, fighting back against aggressive decks.
Sure. I mean, the big thing to me is that the difference in speed between Shadowwood Hara and Mossy Hara is usually, a case of death. Because if you just leave them for two turns and then you go, oh, I'm going to play my Shadowwood Hara later, usually you just die. And the other big thing is that Pint-Sized Potion is rotating out. So that was a big synergy card with Shadowwood Hara that helped it scale into the late game. And I think Mossy Hara is definitely going to suffer from that. So on the Shadowwood Hara comparison, most of the time I'd rather have Shadowwood Hara. The big thing here is Mossy Hara is neutral. So maybe some of the other classes that never really had access to Shadowwood Hara might be interested in Mossy Hara.
Also, the problem is by turn 6, is like you said, with the pint-sized potion, is how many, 2 or less attack minions are there really going to be?
Yeah.
After, on turn 6, and that's, like you said, you might just be dead by then.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see how the meta turns out, right?
The one use, looking at the current meta, which is obviously not a very good indicator because there's a massive standard rotation happening, but the one use that I can see for Mossy Hara is to kill a lot of Void Walkers as well. It's an effective way to kill a lot of Void Walkers, and that is a scenario that will happen generally later in the game. Unless they've managed to cheat out their Void Lord very efficiently. The other card that kind of was, Mossy Hara more reminded me of, and that's because it being a neutral minion and kind of taking this previously class-based kind of effect in a way to a neutral space, is Corrupted Seer. Obviously, it has a much better body than Corrupted Seer, being a 2/7 instead of a 2/3. The battle cry, I'd say, is arguably worse because it's much easier to make 2 damage work versus, the 2 or less attack, especially in the late game. Obviously, both will affect your side of the board as well. But obviously, you can kind of play around your Mossy Hara maybe a little bit easier than your Corrupted Seer. And they both also kind of bring an effect to the neutral space, because Corrupted Seer is a little bit like a symmetrical consecration. It's not an exact effect. Like Mossy Hara is literally just Shadowwood Hara, but Corrupted Seer kind of did something similar and was a card that people hyped up a little bit before it came out and really wasn't particularly good. So I think that's a little bit of a warning sign for me with Mossy Hara.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, also another card I just realized, actually similar to in a way as well, is Bookworm.
Yeah, I thought about Bookworm, but Bookworm quite importantly kills 3 attack minions, and there's a lot of 3 attack minions that are relevant in the meta, Void Lord being one of them. So Bookworm is actually the first thing I thought of, and then I was like, no, actually, you can't compare it to Bookworm at all. Which is why I think it's more relevant to compare it to the Corrupted Seer and the Shadowwood Hara. Moving on, we have Splitting Fester Root. This is an 8 mana 4/4 epic minion with Death Rattle, summon 2/2 splitting saplings. So when I first read this and when I tweeted about it, I was like, what? Why would I pay 8 mana for 8/8 stats and the second half is delayed? That's terrible. But as you pointed out to me, the 2/2s are also like their spawner, in this case. They also split, so they split down into 1/1s. So in the end,
2 1/1s each.
Yeah, sorry, into 2 1/1s. So in the end, you're getting 12 worth of stats, but it's split over quite a lot of turns. And at some point, you have to pay 8 mana for a 4/4. So that means
and also the bodies are quite weak, like when you get them, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, none of them are really massive threats.
Yeah, I think Splitting Fester Root is terrible. I would have paid 2 mana gladly for a 2/2 that's split into 2 1/1s. That would have been very good. But at 8 mana, when you're paying that for a 4/4, no.
Yeah, and I mean, if you play this in any aggressive token deck, on turn 8, this is not what you want to be doing.
No. You'd much rather be playing Living Mana.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. No. I'm not even sure if this card will be even good in Arena.
No,
like
Violent Worm is 100 times better, right? It's just it's honestly, that's the thing. It's just so much worse than Violet Worm. Why would I play this card? It's terrible.
Yeah, and it's ironic there's an epic as well.
Yeah, and moving on to a not terrible epic, we have Voodoo Doll. Voodoo Doll is a 3 mana 1/1 epic minion with Battle Cry. Choose a minion. Death Rattle. Destroy the chosen minion. So quite a cool thematic thing there, with witches and voodoo. They obviously kind of tie in kind of well, and the idea here is that the voodoo doll becomes the minion, and when the voodoo doll dies, the minion dies as well. So I first of all, thematically, that's like 100% good job, right on the money. And secondly, when it comes to power, I think voodoo doll is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's like a 3 mana assassinate. And in classes like, or like a delayed, it's like a 3 mana corruption, really, because you'd expect Voodoo Doll to always die when it comes back to your turn and you can attack with it. And
most of the time, you're playing this where you can trigger it immediately, right?
Yeah. So in Mage, it's more like a 5 mana removal, which is pretty much like an assassinate, right? And in classes like Warrior, where you can trigger it with your Whirlwind effects on a Blood Rays or Warpath, those kind of things, it's also quite useful there.
You can even enrage, I'm just saying. You can even potentially turn 3, like for 3 mana, Voodoo Doll and enrage it. I'm just saying,
okay.
Is it possible?
Okay, sure.
I mean, the main thing is obviously going to be the Whirlwind effects.
Yeah.
I mean, in Warlock, you've got Dark Pact and Mortal Coil.
And Defile.
Which are quite cheap ways. So I think Voodoo Doll will definitely see play in those decks. I mean, I'm not sure if the control or cube warlocks will have space or need it. I mean, I think they might.
I think they will. I think its power with Defile is really important to note. It's a way to kill the big body that you can't kill with Defile whilst killing all the small stuff at the same time. So it achieves something really good in that scenario. And it also synergizes with Lord Godfrey. So it's not just Defile, right? You can, because Lord Godfrey is 7 mana, you can play Lord Godfrey and Voodoo Doll in the same turn as well.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now you have 2 other ways to get that first kind of activation on the Defile and the Lord Godfrey. And it just adds so much more removal to the deck, right?
Yeah. Also, I was just thinking, it's actually pretty decent. Like in mirrors as well now, like let's say against Void Lords, it's pretty good because like you play this Defile, it will most likely kill the Void Walkers as well.
Yeah, so that is the way that you can kind of line it up.
It will make the math.
It does 1 to 4, right?
Yeah.
Because the Void Lords essentially have 4 health because the Voodoo Doll dies first and then they spawn at 3.
Yeah.
So you still need to bridge the 2-3 gap. It's not that easy, but it definitely helps you take down Void Lords which in the mirrors, which can be pretty powerful.
So it's going to make the math even more complicated, I think.
Yeah, and for Frostlich Jaina, most importantly there, it also allows you to generate an elemental at the same time, which it's like a cheaper way of polymorphing and pinging a minion. You just don't get the kind of silence effect that goes with it in that scenario. Yeah. But Voodoo Doll is, I think, a really important card. The big class that sticks out to me, we talk about all this Warlock synergy, and the big thing with that deck is, does it have the space for it? Whereas with Mage, I go, yes, this is a really good card. Even if you just played on 3 as some removal against a more aggro or mid-range deck, it can be pretty decent, as the Mage doesn't really have spells for removal in those early turns. So I think Voodoo Doll is going to be really good in Mage. And it is another card that you can draw with the Countess, because it has that Death Rattle.
So, I mean, straight up there, you've got a mostly unconditional removal option.
Yeah.
That even, I mean, I know it's not that relevant, that gets through the can't be targeted effects, like the card that gets through your Fairy Dragon effects. So, I mean, Shroud, we'll call it Shroud because that's what they call it in Magic. But
yeah. So Voodoo Doll can kill Tyrantus, confirmed.
Exactly.
Yeah. All those bear sharks, if they've been.
Yes, all those bear sharks you've been seeing.
I mean, honestly, you see them a lot from like Rexar.
That's true.
Once they fix Rexar, Deathstalker Rexar, we're going to see less of them because the pool gets bigger. So you see less of the immune effect. But you do tend to see the immune effect quite often, actually, against the hunters. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Voodoo Doll, I think a really powerful minion. And a pretty exciting one as well. Next up, we have Worgen Abomination. Worgen Abomination is a 7 mana 6/6 epic neutral minion. It reads, at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all other damaged minions. So
We were
obviously,
joking.
this needs the minions to be damaged, which is definitely a bit of a problem, and you kind of need to find synergy ideally with that. And I mean, where is it that you're going to find that synergy?
So warrior, yeah, like I was saying, is we were kind of joking. It's like even though it's a neutral minion, in reality, it's probably actually just a warrior minion because it red damaged minions.
Yeah.
I mean, so the first card that came to my mind when I thought this was Abyssal Enforcer, but obviously this is a bit different because it's less damage and you need an activator. So in reality, this is actually a little bit more like Steep with the Fishes on a Stick.
Yeah.
In a way, except this deals 2 damage instead of Steep with the Fishes deals 3 damage to more damage minions.
Yeah.
But this, I mean, if you can set this up, or let's say turn 8 even, you go, let's say Whirlwind and this. I mean, it's a pretty strong, I mean, it's like a strong board clear and you develop a body, which I think is a very strong tempo swing.
Yeah, the other important thing to note, once again, the downside of this being on a stick, which for those who are maybe not familiar with the nomenclature, basically just means, it has a body attached to the ability. And in this case, it kind of limits the combos, the synergy that you can do with it. There is also like Defile, but you can't do anything that's, more than 3 mana. So you can't like Hellfire play this. You can't play Blood Razor and play this in the same turn. So it definitely limits the synergy, especially in Warrior with Warpath as well. You can only really use 1 Warpath in the same turn as Worgen Abomination. Whereas, if we had something like Sleep with the Fishes, you could use up to 4 Warpaths before you Sleep with the Fishes.
And also just because this effect is it's a static end of a turn.
Yeah.
But like in reality, you just consider it for the first time, you guarantee it. And if it is ever going off the second time, the chances are you're probably far ahead of enough that you're just winning by then, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, like this card, we consider it specifically for you expecting to get only the first activation off. That's how we look at the card, right?
Yeah, it definitely helps you keep an oppressive board state going. But it is really, it's almost like a battle cry, even though it's really an end of turn effect, right? You can synergize it with Drakari Enchanter. That is 10 mana to play, and then you're dealing 4 damage to all damage minions at the end of your turn.
I was just thinking,
if you
Despicable Dreadlord on 5, this on 7.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, if you set up the Blood Razor beforehand, then you attack, and then you play Drakari Enchanter, Worgen Abomination, you're dealing 5 damage to everything that's on board. I mean, sure, but I don't think Warrior is going to be, at least, those kind of control warriors are going to be lacking for removal, and I don't think they want to play Drakari Enchanter, so that one's a little bit fringe.
But Blood Razor plus this is not that fringe, though. That is a more, like, without the Drakari Enchanter, having set up a Razor and then holding it for the Worgen Abomination, I can see it happening. Whether, the slow control warrior will become a thing again, considering, the Cold Ground Oracle is moving to a Hall of Fame. We'll have to see.
Yeah. The other thing it does provide for the warriors, for the odd warrior, it can be relevant. Being 7 mana, you can play it with cards like Whirlwind. So it gives you some different removal options when you can't play Deadly Arsenal, one of the cards we've gone over before, and you can't play Warpath or Blood Razor. It gives you kind of other ways of damaging minions. So, I could imagine you play a deck with this and cards like King Mosh, I think it is. The one that actually executes all the damage minions.
Yes.
So, if you're playing Whirlwinds to synergize with Worgen Abomination, you could try and synergize them with King Mosh too. So, maybe
King Mosh.
Maybe
Mosh can find some use.
Maybe in a odd control warrior, that could be a sleeper spot for Worgen Abomination. But I think in a deck where you're not trying to worry about the Baku synergy with odd, I don't know if Worgen Abomination will quite make the cut in control warrior.
Yeah.
Because the real thing is just that the mana inflexibility at being 7 mana. That's what really gets to me with it. But that is the last card we have for this impressions video. Clocking in at just under an hour, so quickly to wrap this up before it goes over an hour. You can find us on Twitter if you want to find out, discuss any of these cards any further, or any of the new ones that come out. You can find Pandemonia at PandemoniaZA. You can find myself at dib_gaming. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share the videos to really, all of that really helps grow the channel, and you'll be able to find out immediately as the next videos go live, which, they go live pretty much straight after we record them. So until the next set of reviews, cheerio.
Cheerio.